It is midterm season, and you've got a lot to think about and to study. And this prayer here, this one, is really the prayer before study of St. Thomas Aquinas. And it's a really good one to pray before your exam or before you sit down to study. You know, when you sit down to study, you say, I'm going to study for the next hour, right? And 15 minutes later, you're like, I'm just going to check this one little thing. And then all of a sudden, it's like, hey, the hour's up. I only studied for 15 minutes. You know? So this prayer will really consecrate your time of study. Study is it's work, but it's a time to draw close to God. You know, it's a beautiful thing to be able to study. And I know you're in the midst of a lot of that right now. And then the other thing we'll get to eventually, but I'll anticipate a little bit. What I always did before exams is I said a prayer to my guardian angel. My guardian angel. Because each person, upon their creation, is given an angel. Is given a guardian angel. And I think we'll have a little section on angels. Angels and demons later on, but not yet. But that's just a little something you want to pray before your exam. Guardian angel. This prayer, you're good to go. Please. Or get up whatever grade you're supposed to get. Tonight I wanted to start with a discussion about human nature. But first, just a few things. Of course, online we have the video and the quiz. If you can't make a course, you can't make a class, you got the YouTube channel, which I've become more familiar with. It's pretty cool, that YouTube channel. Edit videos and all sorts of stuff. Sponsors, if you're still searching for a sponsor, I have actually a lot of time after class today, so it'd be great if we just have a conversation after class, if you're still looking for a sponsor. And then lastly, just a Bible and a catechism. Try to purchase one of those each. They're kind of the best tools that we have, and as we go along, I might be using them more and more, especially the Bible, maybe giving you guys certain passages to read from week to week. Okay? So those are our little bullet items. But first, I want to just have a discussion, because we've been talking a lot about the human person. Right? The very first class, I said that we will begin not with God, but with man. We'll begin with the human person. Right? And that's because the catechism does that. The catechism begins with the human person's search after God. Right? But it might be good if we back up a little bit and have a discussion about what is the human person. How would you describe a human being? Right? So maybe we'll work first on description, and then we'll work towards a definition. Okay? But the floor is open. What is a human person? How would you describe a human person? What are their traits? What do they do? What actions do they do? What traits do they have? We all have an experience of being a person, right? So what do you do?
Mind, body, and spirit.
Mind, body, and spirit. All right, please. Mind, body, and spirit. Very good. Where did you come up with those?
I read it somewhere.
Very good. You probably read it in St. Paul. Right? This is the basic anthropology of the Bible. Right? Of St. Paul. Sometimes called a three-part anthropology. Mind, body, and soul. He uses these a lot to describe the human person. What other things would we use to describe? Yeah.
Free will.
Free will. Free will. Okay. Very good. What else?
Intelligent and loving.
Intelligent. Loving. Are we alone in this world? What did Aristotle say about the human person? Man is a blank animal. mean we watch CNN all day? What does this word mean in Greek? Polis. Means city. Yep, city. Right? So we are city dwellers. I grew up in the country, though. That doesn't apply to me. Right? Now, it doesn't really mean that. It just means that we are social, right? We're social. Right? We even come into this world, right, surrounded by a mother. We have a mother, right? We don't, right? Even our biology tells us that we are social. But we're not alone. No one's alone, right? Even if we live out in the hills, and where I grew up. Anything else? What about what did we talk about last week? We said that we talked about different religions, right? And we said man is a religious being, right? Or we seek meaning, right? We seek meaning. We often seek meaning in religions or traditions or myths. Okay? Now what else? Anything else? Did we miss anything? Any person? I think we did pretty well. There's 4 characteristics I want to focus on. I think we hit them all. Okay, first is body, freedom, intellect, and social. Okay? These are the 4 characteristics of human nature that I will focus on tonight. Okay, you can think of others, but these 4 really accompany, or excuse me, you could say capture the human person, right? Our anthropology. Okay. Now, here we go. The human person. We have a drawing here by Michelangelo, the human person. Right? It shows the body. Right? We are not angels. We are not spirits. But we're biological. We have bodies. We are free. We have free will. We are rational. At least most of the time, unless we get really drunk, then we might not be too rational, right? Sort of takes away our reason. And we are social, right? We're social. Even the hermit, even the person who tries to go off and live by themselves is still social in some ways, at least in the way they came into this world. Okay? Now, so far, we talked a little bit about last week, especially about this one, right? That man is social, right? Or at least that we seek meaning, right? We seek meaning in our tradition, in our myths. We talked a lot about the thirst for meaning, which usually falls under kind of the social characteristic. The idea that we are free and that we are embodied, we will touch on in other classes. Okay, but tonight, we are focusing on our reason, right? That we are rational, right? We think and we seek the truth, right? But how rational are we? Right? That's the question I have. How rational is Christ? Okay. Do you think that the human person is more about the heart, more about the head? Or does it just depend? Depends from person to person. Do most people make their life, act in their life, according to their heart or according to their mind? What do you think? You got opinions? Ideas? Do you think it depends? Somebody said maybe the heart. Caleb?
I think it kind of varies on the situation too. Some things you feel like more drive from the heart than you do from the mind.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we are rational, but when I was in seminary, I read this book called Irrational Man. Anyone ever read this book? Pretty awesome book. It's all about the existentialist philosophers, right? Because they were tired of all these people saying that the human person is rational. They said, no, the human person isn't rational, right? We may be rational, but that's sort of secondary. First is our heart, right? We desire things. Right? And so the great existentialist is Pascal, Blaise Pascal, who was also a mathematician, right? He said the heart has reasons that reason does not know. Right? The heart has reasons that reason does not know. Right? And that's true, right? I mean, we are going to follow our hearts most of the time in life, right? Especially when it comes to these decisions, right? The decision of our faith, our relationship with God, right? Even that word relationship, right? It speaks kind of more to the heart than to the mind. Right? Here's an interesting quote from St. Jerome, right? You know, how rational was Christ? St. Jerome, he read the scriptures, of course, he was an expert. And he said this, he said, Plato placed the soul in the mind, but Christ in the heart. And if you read the New Testament, right, Jesus, he's often speaking of the heart. He uses that word a lot, right? It's because the hardness of your hearts that Moses allowed divorce. And that's in today's gospel, right? Jesus says, blessed are the pure in heart. So it's part of his vocabulary, and it's really where he focuses. Right, so St. Jerome said, Plato placed the soul in the mind. Why did he say that? Plato was the Greek philosopher, right? He focused more on the logos, on man's rationality, than he did on the heart. And then Jesus, however, he kind of saves us here, right? So all of this is pointing towards why the heck are we going to talk about man's reason, right? If we're just all about the heart. But Jesus himself says something very, very important. Right? And kind of this is the whole reason we're having tonight's class on our rationality, on an argument for God's existence, which we'll get to in a bit. Right? Because Jesus says you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And that gives us a great reason to use our minds, right, to seek after God with our reason. Right? Jesus himself said this, right? Your heart, your soul, your mind, and strength. Okay, so as much as this book, Irrational Man, wants to downplay the role of our intellects and our minds and say we're just about the emotions, we're about the heart, right? Jesus himself upholds this importance of our mind. We must use our reason. Okay? So how rational should we be? Right? How much time should we spend in our heads? Hopefully not too much, but a little bit, right? Something. Right? We have to use our minds. Right? This is from the first letter of St. Peter. Right? This is the classic scripture quote that St. Augustine followed his whole life. And as St. Thomas Aquinas, all the great saints of the church had this quote sort of nagging them and inspiring them as they went about their work. All right? And pretty much any theologian, anyone who has applied their mind to the faith or that profession, basically lives off of this Bible quote right here. Right? Be ready always to give an answer to every man that asketh you a reason of the hope that is in you. Be always ready to give an answer for the reason of the hope that is in you. Okay, so the scriptures themselves inspire us, right? Promote us to do this work of applying our minds to our faith. Okay, so what is rationality? Right, this guy right here, He's the man of the mind right here. I mean, just look at him. He's super smart. He's got the glasses. You know, people with big intellects usually have lots of big, tall forehead. Actually, I think this is actually true. I don't know. Look up a bunch of scientists. They all have big foreheads. Father Mark, if you watch this on Catholic.org, you have a big forehead, and we know you're really smart. So, anyways, I'm gonna have to cut that part out of the video. But it's our rationality, right, that we were focusing on tonight. And of course, back to the ancients, right? Aristotle said we all desire to know, right? We have intellectual desire. We want to know what is true, right? And what does it mean to know? What does it mean to know? The word in Greek is episteme, which means to be familiar with, to be around, right? To sort of be, you know someone if you're around them, if you're close to them, right? This word, right, to know, was actually a euphemism, right? In the scriptures, Adam knew Eve, and then they had a child. Okay, that's how the scriptures use the word to know, right? It means in close contact, right? To be around, right? And we know something with our intellect, right? With our intellect, and there's certain acts, there's certain things that our intellect does, okay? And the reason I have this guy's picture up here is because he's a philosopher. He's also a priest. But he had a great theory about what our intellect does. And that's what we're going to kind of follow tonight. His name's, I'll write his name. His name is Bernard Lonergan. I think he was Canadian, and he lived in the 20th century. He's a Jesuit. The Society of Jesus. They always put SJ at the end of their name. Pope Francis is a Jesuit. Okay, it's a group of priests, religious order. Okay, and these were the acts of the intellect that he sort of broke down. And this comes from a long tradition in the church. He's not the one who came up with it, but he kind of spelled it out in a clear way. All right, so the acts of the intellect. First is experience. Okay, first is experience. How do you know anything? You have a sense experience, right? Aristotle said there's nothing in the intellect that's not first in the senses, right? So you hear someone talk, you hear someone say something. That's a sensible experience, right? And then you take that in, right? And you try to next understand, okay? Understanding. You sort of filter things together, you make concepts, you try to make connections of things, right? And that's an act of the intellect, to understand. Thirdly is to make a judgment. Right? And this is the sort of the highest act of the intellect. The last one on there is more in the will, right? To make a decision is more under the free will. But the intellect, it's really experience, understanding, and judgment. Making a judgment. That's what we do. And we do this all the time. We don't really reflect on it all that much. But we're doing this all the time, right? It's 7 o'clock. I just had an experience of it being 7 o'clock because I looked at the clock, right? I understand class starts at 7:15. I'm going to make a judgment. It's good for me to leave right now and not 2 minutes, okay? All this. And it's this process that we go through. Okay, but judgment is really the core of our rationality, to make the judgment, right? Because animals have experience, right? They even have their own type of animal sort of emotions, sensible experiences, right? They can't really understand, they can't form concepts, nor can they make judgments. So as you move up, you get to higher levels of rationality. And judgment is really that highest act that we can carry out. Okay? Right? Being rational means making judgments. Right? This is from St. Anselm. to be able to discriminate between what is just and what is unjust, between what is true and what is not true. Right? That's what we do. We make a judgment. Right? And tonight we're going to be moving towards this question, which is a very important question, and we're going to try to make a judgment on it. Right? Right? Does God exist? Right? There you go. That's the question for tonight. Right? We'll get to it in a second, but that is that true or is that not true? And our whole intellect has to be involved in making a judgment about that. Okay. Secondly, just kind of as an aside, Lonergan talks about two types of knowledge that we have. Right? Common sense knowledge and theoretical knowledge. And I'm not going to go into this too much, but these are, we use them both in our life. But when it comes to really reflecting on this question, does God exist, we're probably moving into the theoretical realm of things, right? Really grappling with ideas and concepts. For a child, it may be common sense that God exists. Right? It might have that naturally. But as soon as you get old, right, you get a little smarter, and then also you want to reflect on things. You want to have more of the theoretical knowledge. Right? And that's the whole science of philosophy is in that theoretical knowledge. Okay? And so what is philosophy? Does anyone know? Does anyone know what philosophy means?
Knowledge.
Love of knowledge. Love of knowledge? Not is close. Love of
Wisdom.
love of wisdom. Right? Love of wisdom. Right? And the church has always upheld philosophy as very, very important. There's other traditions, other religions that don't pay attention to it as much. And we touched on this a little bit. But in a broad picture, like Martin Luther or the entire Muslim traditions, or Protestants and Muslims, tend to have a more negative view of philosophy than Catholics. And these are two quotes from John Paul II that just basically are like they show us, right, how important philosophy is. Philosophy emerges then as one of the noblest of human tasks. The desire for truth is part of human nature itself. And so, in these first few weeks, we're not getting to Revelation yet. But we have to sort of set this groundwork, right, so that Revelation has a solid footing. And by Revelation, I mean just what the events that happen in Scripture, right? Philosophy, then, is one of our noblest tasks, right? And in philosophy, there's lots of different subjects, right? Does anyone know any of them? In philosophy, what could you study? What classes would you take? This is one class, right? Natural theology. We'll talk about that one tonight. What else would you study in philosophy? Ethics. There you go. Ethics. What is ethics? Ethics. Yep.
This might be totally wrong, but like morality.
Yeah, morality, morals, right? Good and bad, right? Morals. We're gonna have some classes on that, right? Because there's a whole theology of morality as well, right? There's the Ten Commandments. There's the study of the virtues. Right? There's the Beatitudes. What else? What else would be in philosophy?
Aesthetics.
Aesthetics. It could be. What do you mean by that?
The Isn't aesthetics a study of beauty?
Study beauty, sure. That's in there. Yeah, I can throw it in there. How about metaphysics? Anyone ever heard of metaphysics? You go to Barnes and Nobles, you go to the metaphysics section, what do you see? A lot of weird stuff. Not really metaphysics as the church has usually thought of it. Right? But metaphysics means the study of existence, of being. Right? You study being insofar as it's existing. Right? It's kind of the most abstract of philosophical courses, but it's very important. Right? It tells us about nature, about creation, about what things really are. Anything else in philosophy? Then we got natural theology, ethics, aesthetics, metaphysics. How about
Logic? I don't know what the second one
logic? That's very good. Logic's very important. Yep. Logic. And there's another one called epistemology. Right? That's how we know things. Epistemology. That's kind of what I was talking about with the understanding, experience, understanding, judgment. That's kind of an epistemology, how we come to know truth. Okay, there's plenty of others, right? But that's kind of the various classes you take in philosophy. And one of them is what we're going to cover tonight. We've just arrived there, okay? And that is natural theology, aka the philosophy of God. Right? And there's all these courses now, like the philosophy of biology, philosophy of religion. We touched on that a little bit last time. Philosophy of religion. Philosophy of love, right? What is love? We had some of that on Thursday night at the talk. Right? So there's lots of, they use it in different ways now, right? And this is the question of natural theology. Does God exist? Right? And it seeks to answer this question without the help of revelation, without the help of the events in history where God has moved towards us. And it's a big question. And it's the most dangerous question to ignore, the most dangerous question to answer wrongly. Because it means everything. Right? It means how we will look at the world, how we look at ourselves, how we look at our relationships. Right? So does God exist? We want to ask that question. We wouldn't be human. Well, I shouldn't put it that boldly. We wouldn't be fully using our intellect if we didn't ask that question. If we didn't ask that question, we'd be maybe shirking our duty a little bit as rational beings, as people who seek truth. Okay. So 20 arguments for God's existence. Don't worry, I'm only going to do one tonight. I'm not going to do 20. I'm only going to do one. Maybe not even one. Maybe we won't get there. I think we'll get there. Okay? Now, a preliminary question. Do arguments work? I mean, have you ever been in an argument about God's existence?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Did you convince anyone that God exists?
I got convinced.
You got convinced. So arguments work. We have our they work. Okay. So if someone doesn't believe in God, all they need to do is come talk to you. Right? You get an argument, they'll be good. Okay. I don't know. Do they work? Have you ever been convinced?
It doesn't work 99% of the time.
Okay. 99. Yeah, I mean, there's no stats on it, but right, it's kind of a feeling that it's hard to just argue your way, right? It's hard to just win an argument that God exists, and then you've made the other person believe, or you yourself believe in God after in existence, right? So these proofs of God's existence, these arguments for God's existence, right? They're not like math and logic. Okay. Outside of math and logic, arguments are probable, not demonstrative. Right? And so when we look at these arguments for God's existence, we have to keep this in mind. And this quote is from another priest, John Henry Newman. Right? Argumentative forms are mainly a test of reasoning. So far they will be but critical, not creative. Right? What he means is that arguments work oftentimes to clear away obstacles. Right? They're critical. They clear away obstacles, but they don't often bring anyone to a belief, to a new judgment, you could say. It might help them on their way. Right? But when we have arguments that are outside of math and logic, we sort of bring our whole selves to it. Right? We got our whole experience of our life. Right? Everything that we've gone through, everything that anyone's ever said to us about God. Right? That first confession in second grade or whatever. You know, we bring our whole memories, our whole backgrounds to these questions. Okay? All right? And we, right, that kind of makes sense, right? Because we're, like we said before, we're not strictly rational. And so if we're going to argue for God's existence, we're going to be totally involved, right? We're going to bring our life experience to that question. Okay. And that's just to say that these arguments have some force. They're important to go over, but they're not everything. Right? They can be critical, but usually, as Newman said, they're not creative. They don't bring us to new positive acts of faith, but mainly just kind of clearing the way. Okay. But there can be exceptions, right? People are convinced. Okay, so the question of natural theology, does God exist? We can reword that question. Right? Can we affirm a truth which transcends our experience? Right? Can we go beyond what our senses take in?
Yes.
You're convinced? But what if I've never experienced God? Can I still affirm that God exists?
Yes.
You can. Well, there's some people who would say no. And I'm going to talk about those people first. Okay? All right. There's some opponents to natural theology. And I don't mean to create straw men. I don't mean to paint these in a light which isn't true, but for the sake of brevity, right, I'll have to summarize a little bit, okay, about these. We're just going to go over these two. Okay, the first is postmodernism, right? So we're in a postmodern world, right? It's no longer the modern era. It's the